So let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm Marilyn. I'm Fluxing Sales Director for North America. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session on how to generate hard savings and increase efficiencies by using a very strong and powerful contract management tool. So first of all, some reminders and housekeeping items about this session. This webinar will be recorded. Please stay on mute. You can type your questions anytime in the chat, and we will have them answers at the end of this session. The agenda of this session is the following. First, we will start with a brief Fluxing and Syrian Labs overview. Then we will enter into the Aéroports de Montréal project, speaking about how they enhance our contract management using Syrian Labs tool. We will then pass to a demo, which will highlight Syrian Labs main features, and we will end the session with some question and answer. So please feel free to type your question in the chat. I'm honored to introduce today's speakers. First of all, Nusha Nishabori, which is Syrian Labs practice lead at Fluxing. Nusha has an extensive experience in both procurement and purchasing. She had worked for a lot of organizations in Canada, both as buyer and business analyst, implementing tools to enhance those processes. She is now, since 2018, Fluxing's lead on the Syrian Labs solution. Then we have Mark. Mark is a Chief Customer Officer at Syrian Labs. Mark has an extensive experience helping global companies to enhance their business processes, and he's now in charge of a world-class customer satisfaction organization at Syrian Labs. And last but not least, Philippe Stas, which is Director for Strategic Procurement at Aéroports de Montréal. Philippe has an extensive experience in both procurement and purchasing, and he makes sure at Aéroports de Montréal that those processes bring added value to the business. A brief introduction about Fluxing and who we are. Our mission is to streamline and digitalize procurement, purchasing, contract management, AP processes. And basically, our ultimate goal is to provide our clients with tools and processes that eliminate inefficiencies and that generate hard savings. Our mission is basically to make sure that we provide value and that we provide an impact, positive impact on the customer's bottom line. We do that in two ways: by providing advisory services on one hand to support our clients throughout their source-to-pay transformation project. We also implement and integrate some best-in-class solution. The first one we started with is Bassware, which is basically focused on procurement and AP automation. Then we added Ivalua to our portfolio. Ivalua is a one-coded based platform which covers extensively the process from source to pay in the organizations. And we recently added to our portfolio Syrian Labs as a partner, because we strongly believe that contracts are at the heart of an organization. And to have a strong contract management solutions, make sure that we streamline and add value to our relationship, both with our suppliers and with our customers. Now I will pass it over to Mark for the Syrian Labs presentation.
Marie, thank you for the introduction and the handoff. So just briefly on Syrian Labs, we are an AI-enabled CLM, obviously working with many large enterprises. We've got expertise in helping clients with their contract negotiations, contract authoring, the full repository, and then a little bit of a newer business for us, but quite a bit of business for us, auto extraction. We're a global company. We were founded in 2012. We work with customers across all industries in all major cities throughout the world. As you can see on this slide on the right side, we've gotten some pretty good recognition in their 2x2 matrices, analyst firms like Gartner, Spend Matters, and Forrester. As you can see from the middle column, we do quite a bit around financial benefits and hard dollar savings with over $300 billion in TCV under our management. So within our system, we've got about $300 billion, 4 million plus obligations, $40 billion in invoice amounts validated, and a lot of hard dollar savings, almost $2.2 billion. Next slide. We've got a three-pronged approach to contract lifecycle management, contract analytics, the authoring, and post-signature governance. For contract analytics, obviously helping to drive insights out of the contracts, working to create and leverage executive dashboards, so starting to tell a story for what those contracts, what those vendors, and what those suppliers mean to our customers. There's some AI for descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive contract analytics. So again, driving from just normal reports to do some analysis on your vendors, ultimately driving to insights and actions. And then obviously highlighting the benefits, documenting the risks of your legacy contracts, and getting that all documented within the contract analytics prong. Second prong is authoring, pretty basic stuff, self-service contract assembly, ease of use for the creation of MSAs, SOWs, different schedules. So kind of that middle layer where companies are looking to author their contracts. And then this piece, post-signature governance, I've actually done this now for about 20 years. So the value leakage for your large strategic accounts, tracking things like obligation management, performance management, which would be the SLAs and KPIs, obviously helping our customers do numerator denominator calculations. So it's a lot of fun stuff the last 20 years doing that. And then invoice validation. So looking at what the strategic contract said it was going to look like and what the payback would be, what would those benefits be and how are those tracked? And did you actually achieve those benefits 6 months, 2 years, 4 years into those strategic relationships? Pass it to the Q&A.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you and welcome everybody to the webinar. Let's just get started. So I guess my first question would be for you, Philippe. Despite the heavy impact of the pandemic in your industry, ADM decided to invest on the future and non-innovative tools. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So absolutely, the pandemic was a really hard hit for the airport industry. And one of the first things we had to do is basically shut down almost all of our contracts. And in that process, we entered in several negotiations with some of our key partners to accommodate for different things during the shutdown period, and accommodate also elements to enable the startup and the relaunch of activities, all with a lot of uncertainties. And so what we found is also our creditors recognize the efforts we did to control our expenses. They've asked us that when things come back to normal, that we do it with increased efficiency. And what we saw is that a tool like Syrian Labs would help us to basically customize contracts, specific contracts for specific needs. So we don't need to use a standard template for everybody. We could really adopt everything we want for every specific needs. And this tool will basically help us manage all of these customized contracts without putting increased labors or resources to manage them. So we saw basically a lot of value add in this.
Great. And Mark, did you register any similar trends in other industries?
I think the trend around the pandemic has set off a technology investments for all industries, all of our customers, probably the companies that are listening to the discussion that we're having today. Just a couple of quotes. 81% of the respondents indicate that they have or will develop plans to implement, replace, or add to contract automation. Another one, 50% of procurement experts are increasing their technology investments post-COVID. So obviously increased spend in technology. Third one, 69% of procurement leaders consider digital and analytic solutions far more valuable in the post-COVID area. So again, kind of supports the story of lots of technology investments, but obviously across all industries, all customers, frankly, large and small. A couple of examples. We recently worked with a healthcare company where they collaborated on a full-scale CLM, so full-scale end-to-end, where they took the contract analytics, the authoring, and the post-signature from the slide we used before. I know Marilyn's going to do a demo in a little bit, so you'll see some of that functionality. I recently worked with a professional services firm, one of the big four, where they are doing some M&A, and we used our auto extraction capability for over 100,000 contracts. We're able to pour through those, pull the metadata, pull the key clauses, pull the key dates, and all relevant information, so that as they merged, or actually in this case they were separating, as they separated, they would be able to know what's in one contract versus what's in the other. And then lastly, financial services company, just supplier management. So that post-signature, taking their strategic contracts, looking at, and we'll talk in a little bit about some of the value leakage, but finding that 3 to 8% of the ACV, the annual contract value, that's always in the service provider's favor. But if you don't look, you can't go back more than either 12 or 18 months, depending on what your contract is. But the ability to do that look back, or as important, from then going forward, to be able to understand what the pricing is, so that you don't get overcharged and you don't run into a situation where you're either paying too much, or if internal audit comes in. We do quite a bit of post-signature around internal audit. And then lastly, technology investments in general have seen a major spike. So 64% of airports are focusing on biometrics with an aim to roll out self-boarding gates by 2023. All of these relationships are driving agreements. So whether they're contracts, agreements, documents, all those things need to get tracked. Obviously, many of us are doing financial services. We all have banks. We do business with banks. There's analytics and AI, blockchains coming. If you haven't seen it, you will. I know EY, I recently transitioned over to Syrian Labs as the Chief Customer Officer about a year ago. Had the pleasure of going to EY's Innovation Center, and they're making big investments in blockchain. And then the last piece is autonomous contracting. So a couple of our customers separately have come to us and said, we want 50 to 60% of our interactions with our vendors to be autonomously fixed from a contract perspective. And so we're collaborating with them, joint sessions, design thinking sessions, to try to figure out, what role can technology play. But it's also more than that. It's program and project management, it's communication and change, it's people and the integration of technology. And that's some of the work that Fluxing did, even with Philippe's team. So, the ability for us to not just be an implementer of technology, but really think about how our companies, how my customers, our customers can extract the most value. So it's not just what is the technology trend, it's how do they use it. And that's what we're doing with Philippe.
Yeah, that's great. Philippe, can you tell us a bit more about your previous contract management process?
Absolutely. So like many organizations, contracts basically all reside in SharePoint, and you have a few people that know where to find them, that know what's in it. And so if you come into an issue during a specific contract, you usually call the expert, and he goes into the document and finds the information. If there's more complex contracts with a lot of deliverables, performance requirements, and all that, we've had to assign, in some cases, 1 to 2 full-time resources to just manage the contract. So very manual, very resource-intensive process.
And to that effect, can you tell us how the solution alleviated some of those pain points?
Yeah. So what we found, it was a bit of a surprise. We knew we were going to get some efficiencies, but What we found is just the tool has helped us, we say, democratize contracts. So basically, it's made them accessible to a lot more people within the organization. The search capability within Syrian Labs tool has just helped us, find specific issues without spending, hours or time, just understanding where and how is it structured in the contract. So the search tool has been something that's been, spread out across the team almost immediately. And then after that, making the supplier accountable for its own performance. Basically, the KPIs that you have in the tool, just makes the supplier, have to justify what they've done along with those KPIs. In the past, there would be a lot of discussion sometimes over certain specific elements and a lot of back and forth, sharing justifications and all that. So here, we've set the obligations, we've set the performance requirements on an agreed time base. They're accountable to provide the updates on the performance. And so the discussion becomes right away on value add elements, not just on arguing, do we have the right info on that. So it's just been a few months in, but we already see a lot of value add. And we've already identified a lot more contracts that we want to migrate to the tool because there's a lot of efficiency.
Let me jump in there, Philippe, because I think, one of the things that I've been doing since I've been around Syrian, we're tracking the operating model or the work breakdown structure for customers just like you. And the ability for us to drive about 60% efficiency in the operating model or the work breakdown structure is something that we've been tracking too. The second, and I think this one is even more important, and I alluded to it in the kickoff a little bit, it's as much around the ability to produce a report because that checks the box from an audit perspective. But really the value is in the analysis or the ability to drive to insights and actions. And so some of the post-signature work we're doing for you around SLAs are green, but the relationship could be red. It's not red, but if the relationship is red, you want to be able to call that out. And it's the intersection of the data from the performance, but also the data from your customer sat. I had another separate customer work with us around change orders, and their change orders were averaging about 50% of their base fees. And so the ability to identify that before it becomes a major problem, they came to me and said, what's the benchmark on change orders on a monthly basis? And I said, I've been doing this for 15 years at the time. There's no benchmark for it, but 50% is too high and 0% is too low. And so what Syrian does in conjunction with the deployment that you've got with Fluxing and how you're rolling it out with you and your team, it's the ability to be this unbiased service of record and have a quantitative type discussion as opposed to an emotional one, right? Service levels green, relationship red, that's bad. Change orders are 50%, you're paying too much. The CIO, the CFO is not going to give any more budget. You're not going to make your numbers, you're not going to get your bonus. So it's the ability to have valid discussions and drive insights and action as opposed to just documenting the report.
Yeah. And Philippe, with all the different solutions on the market, what made Syrian Labs stand out for you?
Well, there's a few things. I'd say, the feedback we got was ease of implementation. The tool, the extraction tool, the fact that we can make the suppliers accountable for their performance within the contract really gave us the confidence that we can go into an era where we're really going to customize each contract to the specifics of the service we want to get into. Whereas before we were more into a standard template approach, just because it was too resource intensive to put more specifics in the contracts. So it opens doors to putting having much more customized relationships with the suppliers and knowing that they're going to be accountable for their performance, and we're going to have facts to justify them. So that's kind of why we chose the tool.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, we all know every solution provider on the market says that they're the best. They bring financial savings. The usual sales pitch. Can you provide us some more details on how Syrian Labs actually generates financial benefits?
Well, I'm not in sales, so I actually get to receive that information as the Chief Customer Officer. So there is quite a bit of coaching to work with our customers, prospects actually, to ensure that as they go through the dialogue for whether they purchase Syrian or not, and what is the value proposition and how much will they save. But they buy our platform based on inputs and advances for contractual, operational, compliance, and most importantly, financial benefits. So the hard dollar savings that we talked about. I alluded to, or actually I gave the number, 3 to 8% of annual contract value is typically overbilled by service providers. That's a stat that we've done pretty well with, and I've been around Syrian now for 10 months and been able to also kind of support that number. Those are hard dollar savings. Now what typically happens, you go back to the service provider, you have a conversation with them, they give what I sometimes refer to as a gift card, so you get a credit off of your next invoice, but at least you get that money back. After a certain point in time, after 12 months, you're not able to do that. So whether it's something, as I alluded to earlier, right, you do this look back audit or you do a continuous audit, the continuous audit is better because going forward now that 3 to 8% never really occurs. Then you also check the box because you're running your relationship more efficiently. There's not these arguments. You know, you're getting the financial benefits on a month-by-month run rate. The other benefit, 80% reduction in customer and supplier disputes. So again, it gets back to that unbiased service of record. It's something that gets documented in our system. We've got a collaboration module that helps with that. And then also I've mentioned the 60% reduction in the manual effort. 90% quicker in contract drafting. So, you know, quite a bit of hard dollar savings, but also some soft dollar that overall, again, just helps the relationship with your service provider. And for these large post-signature, large strategic contracts, that's the kind of relationship you want. You can't walk those back after you sign up for those big deals. Divorce really isn't an option. So I've done quite a bit of consulting on and what I call health checks, and you know, kind of studied this, and you just have to figure it out. 2 years into an outsourcing contract, there might be this friction. You have a good dialogue, you do it with facts. Hopefully it's facts out of Syrian, but if not, facts out of the Excel templates that you're using, the trackers that you've got, and you're able to have valid conversations and in essence help the relationship.
I think it's time we talk about the project now. So Philippe, when did the project kick off?
We started the deployment in January, and by early April we were using it. So it was quite rapid.
Yeah, quite impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe one of the things we enjoyed is from our side, we only needed to deploy 3 resources to support the implementation. Basically, they were the subject matter expert of the contract. So we wanted to make sure that the spirit of the contract was well understood by the deployment team, so that it could be uploaded properly in the system. And then we did a little bit of test and validation, and we're up and running. So it's very transparent and fluid for us.
And Mark, that timeline is quite impressive. Is that an average timeline for Syrian Labs implementation?
I think there's a consulting answer there where it depends, and it really does depend on the scope, the implementation, the global reach, the number of business units, the amount of change management that's required. So what we typically say is 8 to 12 weeks. Also, timelines are improving. We're able to leverage our leading practices. We've got different deployment technologies. We're working with Fluxing, so we've got you folks trained. I know you're even helping us, a little bit of reverse engineering training for some of the folks that are doing some of the training for you. And then we've got repeatable workflows. So all in all, it feels right. You know, this one was particularly good because of the, you know, doing it remotely.
Yeah. And Philippe, have you had any feedback from the users? What's their experience? What are the first results you're seeing right now?
Well, a couple of things. First, on the deployment, the feedback was, Syrian with Fluxing worked as one team. We didn't see any distinction. It was a seamless effort. So it makes them want to do it again. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, at first we were thinking that there was only going to be 3 or 4 key resources that were going to tap into the tool to manage that specific contract. And it turns out that, in this specific case, it's one of our most complex IT contracts. It touches a lot of people, and everybody's going into the tool to do some search capability. And then when it's time to do our first business reviews with our supplier, we've got the data, it's all there. And you were talking, Mark, about healthy relationships. The fact that the facts are taken care of, the friction is not there, it enables us to start talking about the future. And so with our partner, we're talking about value add for other projects instead of arguing about the deployment of what's already in place. And for us, that's, it's part of strategic procurement. That's really important for us.
Kudos for your team, though, for making the investment. Oftentimes, and done outsourcing advisory deals, for the last 10 years or so. And the problem I see is when they get through the deal, the contract signed, and everybody just kind of goes like this, and they all go on their way. They put the contract in a repository and they applaud themselves. And then 3 months, 6 months, 12 months in, something comes up where they've got to pull the contract out. It starts to cause some confusion. They really need to kind of drive those insights. So the ability for you to, number one, have a team, be able to have technology, and again, less about just checking the box for reporting or compliance, but really helping your folks focus on how can you strive to make the relationship better. And that's what I find is key. And then you don't have to do those health checks 2 years in to those outsourcing relationships, because you're having those conversations on a monthly, quarterly, or even daily basis.
Mark, I have a question for you. As the partnership with Fluxing for the implementation is growing, tell us about how this model works for Syrian Labs.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me well? I know I'm on my, okay. As the partnership with Fluxing is growing, as far as the implementation is concerned, tell us more about how this model works for Syrian Labs.
Yeah, no, I think it's perfect. It's really where we want to be from a business perspective. We're all about the technology. We need great partners like Fluxing to kind of help us potentially sell, but also more importantly, deliver on the commitments that our sales teams are making. So it's critical for us to, again, not just deliver for Philippe and his team, but really think about how we can more broadly address some of the issues that we see with other customers in the adoption, the integration, the usage, additional scope that might be brought in. We kind of refer to some of that as farming. There's always, for large companies, there's usually another piece of the business that when they see a technology platform that's working on one side, they look for the other. So I think it's that level of interaction with Fluxing to be able to pull you folks in even earlier than Philippe, and then the ability for us to be transparent, share information. I kind of call it a franchise. We kind of have some information you do. Let's share that information and go to market and deliver for our customers.
Great. Well, thank you, Philippe and Mark, for your invaluable input. We've kind of concluded the interview portion right now, and I think it's time. I think everybody wants to see what the solution looks like, so I'll be handing it over to Marilyn. Marilyn's going to be showing you guys the main features of the Syrian Labs application. Marilyn, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I'm Marilyn Salyer. I'm a senior solution engineer with Syrian, and I'm pleased to kind of give you this high-level overview today. If we want to advance the slide or give me, there we go. Mark talked about some of the pillars that we have within the application and really kind of described where it fits into an organization, but I'm going to give you a high level from the standpoint of really how we see things, meaning from a past, present, and future state. So I'll show you a little bit about the contract analytics and how we extract information within the system, how we can basically make your contracting process frictionless and ability to really see those insights as you're negotiating, and then of course some of the post-signature management components of that. And with that, if you want to give me a presentation rights, so I can go ahead and do that. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see my screen at the point where we're really looking at one of the Syrian dashboards, which is really something that, Philippe had mentioned, the insights that can be provided, the searching capability within the system, and the personalization of information. Syrian really can surface information based on different users and their personas and their interest. And that information, we have a number of key performance indicators that I'm kind of scrolling through right now that can give you visibility into those particular contracts. And we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at some of the specifics on the different agreements, but wanting to show you that these are not just pretty pictures. These can actually take me into actionable information so that I can start working on those particular contracts and insights and seeing that information from the beginning. From the standpoint of looking at, many times people are coming to us with their legacy contracts and information, being able to see the insights and extracting that information with Syrian AI providing visibility into what your current portfolio may look like. And that may come from mergers and acquisitions or bringing contracts into the system and being able to identify where you have missing provisions or commercial terms or where contracts are located for certain areas of information. And even to provide those insights that people are looking for, especially with the recent pandemic, where force majeure may be within a contract, or where you have the ability to do step-in rights or termination for convenience. So the dashboards can surface information, alert you to this particular data, and also provide drill down to those specific contract records themselves. So you can see some of the key capture metrics that we've had on these agreements. And this is really something where people are saying that information is great, that's what we're looking for, but how does that happen? Is that the automation component within the system? So for that, I'm going to just really move over to an example where a contract has been provided into Syrian AI, and we can do this in batches. Obviously, we can do network drives. We can also do full integrations to migrate information over. But some of the key characteristics that we have are really kind of helping you identify with your contracts where you might have duplicates within the information that you're pulling over. You might have stored them in multiple places so that you can use this to cleanse your information that's coming over. We can pull in really any format from PDF, image PDF, Excel, HTML, image formats as well. And one of the first things we do is do that optical character recognition so that you can use kind of the full text searching as well as metadata searching that we're going to be providing in the system as well. The workhorse is really on the right-hand side, where the information that's being extracted can be, what I consider to be header data, which might be who are the different counterparties or what's the effective date of this particular agreement, but really looking at the internals of this contract to identify some of those positions so that you can also identify, do we have areas for business continuity within this agreement? So you notice that it has identified those from information that we have within the system, as well as the ability to really kind of drill down into specific components of information as well. So this really provides, and you're seeing some of our confidence levels that we have within the millions of documents that the system has been trained on. In addition to categorizing these different clauses and components that we're looking at, we can also get down into more granular detail. So what you were seeing on the dashboard page, which might be even, do we have force majeure? Well, yes, we have force majeure, but we also have different characterizations of force majeure, meaning that we have strikes, we've got acts of God, labor disputes, civil commotions. I was just doing one recently. I think people have tightened this up, that had about 16 different categories of information that's in there. So, these are things that can be surfaced that can let you know whether conditions are in a contract or not, or whether they're missing in an agreement or not, and also to the level of depth. From an obligation standpoint, this is also really where Syrian starts to really separate itself, really identifying what are some of the obligations that are articulated in these contracts, and not only the obligation itself, but also who the responsible party is within this particular agreement, and also if there's financial impact that is associated with it, such as credit clauses or earnbacks that are in there, which we can operationalize to use against our performance modules, and also for the standpoint of triangulating when invoices come in, is there a credit or an invoice based on that performance. And we can take this out to additional levels, such as not just the obligations, which are the information about the milestones, deliverables, etc., but also the SLAs that are promised. If somebody promises you X amount of uptime, etc., what's going on with that? So this is where we can tie this together with schedulers, that if an SLA is supposed to be met on a regular cadence, we can tie that into the system and also match that up against the performance that we are receiving on those SLAs. And the last point I just want to talk about is also identifying information that may be coming from tables that are, you know, kind of unstructured information that may be in contracts, where we can identify information within the tables and also use that within the system so this can be operationalized as well. We'll look at some of the performance metrics in a bit, but I just wanted to kind of move over to the next segment or pillar, which is really the authoring and contract lifecycle for our contract request and work in progress. Of course, we're also tailoring the user environment and dashboards to those participants as well. So I can see the contracts that are in flight, what is on my particular plate, and if you have members in the organization that are actually managing multiple participants within this, also the ability to see things such as workload assignments so that you can workload balance. You know, Ajanta has a lot of on her plate, me not so much. And we're also tracking things such as the cycle time of how long different steps are doing so that we can keep things in motion and also improve on processes as well. The contracts request area, this is really showing me things that are on my plate that I'm working with, and very easy for me to see exactly the status of those agreements, and also flags that are indicating you know, how we've been going through the negotiations on these contracts. We have a request form within the system, request portal, but that can ask for any type of questions, just gathering the minimum information for a user to fill in and really provide them the ability to also do self-serve agreements like you might have with a non-disclosure that is really very low touch. Those requests can also be initiated from external systems as well. So that might be from a CRM or from an award system that you might have from the purchasing. Just wanted to take you in to see what a contract record looks like. And you can see a lot of the visuals here that are giving me status updates of exactly where this contract is and how long it's been in that particular state. I can also open this up to look at where it has been in the audit trail and who are the identified participants. I'm kind of playing all roles here, but that would identify the different people that have been stakeholders or actors within this the contract, whether it's reviewers or approvers, etc. The contract documents, once generated, or even third-party paper, are securely housed within the system, and we're also tracking the different revisions as we negotiate these agreements. And as we go through the negotiation process, our artificial intelligence runs throughout the entire platform. So not only from extraction, but also into how this contract is getting negotiated. And whether that is third-party paper or contracts driven from your own environment using our clause libraries and template libraries, we can identify you know, where things have been modified, changed, and added, and have approval processes or workflows identified with those particular changes and views. I might have someone who is specifically in charge of managing a review if something goes through fees and payments review, or somebody adds in let's say an IP clause or something that, you know, tax needs to look at. There can be ownership along this, and we can send those components out, and you're seeing the ability for me to do side-by-side comparisons in the system that are really targeted towards asking that particular reviewer to provide their comments or approvals. Of course, with negotiating the contracts, we also leverage standard tools for user adoption. So, you know, as I'm working, I can work in my standard Microsoft Word environment and use all the functions that I'm used to using. But you notice we have embedded Syrian directly within my Word environment. So I also have access to the clause libraries and options that may be already within the Syrian that I might want to access. So if I could edit this particular area, but I can also say, you know, hey, let's look at some of the variations I might have for that particular position. And, you know, it's showing me highlighting what the current position is. Maybe I want to look at some of my other positions or even replace that information directly within Syrian. So it lets people work where it makes sense. And in addition to this, I can also engage other stakeholders by sharing this agreement directly out of Syrian or out of my Microsoft Word and send this out to my counterparty along with comments. And this is also a smart service that allows people, anyone to receive this. And if they respond back to this email, it comes directly back into Syrian as well, into the communication area, including their changes. You're also getting copied, and this is, again, where Syrian helps engage people. This is my Outlook environment, and you notice that there is a toolbar directly within inside my Outlook that if somebody sends me a turn of the agreement, or they send me a third-party paper to review, or they want to work on something else, you notice on the far right-hand side, I have access directly to be able and drag and drop this, into Syrian from here, even identifying, if it came in from a specific component. So a lot of different ways to really empower people to work, as well as our collaborative mode, which could allow me to engage, multiple people in an editing session at one time, where we're all really editing in this agreement, and when we submit that back to the system, it's a single copy of information. As we go through and advance the workflow, and of course the workflow is really going to be based off of what is it that you need, what are the different touch points and approval points on this particular contract. The contract also then will be posted or released into the repository, along with other exhibits and information. And here you can really see that this particular agreement is part of my relationship that I have with Martin Services, and I can see all the different agreements and components that I have with Martin in a very easy to digest view and navigate to those or work on them as well. This is where some of the post-signature management comes by, really kind of managing the relationship between the obligations that we have, as well as tracking information that we might have about some of the pass-through. So, kind of going back to the dashboard, one of the dashboard elements that we have is also looking at managing the performance of this contract against those obligations that we outlined, and the SLAs as well. So from this perspective, I can really see, SLAs or performance that might be broken down by the category, what we have by the month, how we're tracking against our SLAs, by the particular supplier that we're working with, do we have issues? And also by the people that are working with those suppliers that are kind of adjusting or managing some of those obligations and SLAs. Are they falling behind? Maybe we need to, give Raju a little bit of support or kind of look what's going on from that particular perspective. So you can really see being able to track the contract from the point that we're, whether that's something that's come in from a legacy perspective from your existing portfolio or an M&A activity, whether that is something that you've negotiated and is now available within the system, or tracking for these particular performance areas. On a contract by contract basis, if we were looking on, what's our overall SLAs, and you can kind of see the different components of the application that I have access to. And again, this is really driven by security privileges. I may be somebody who's just working on the authoring of new agreements or bringing things in, but this really kind of brings that information out. Looking at a specific view for monthly performance, or even a specific contractor supplier, I can really see this information and be notified of it or have preview to it, ahead of time of information. And drilling into any of these, if I can see on a frequency basis, because we're tracking this particular SLA is supposed to be on a monthly basis, or it could be, something yearly like an insurance certificate update. But we can also tie this information back to the contract. What's the financial impact? Drilling into that particular SLA, we're looking at information about this. If I scroll up, we can see this is that SLA. We've got the expected value that is supposed to be based on that. Also information that has to do with what happens if there's a failure to fulfill that. And it's directly tied back to the information that we had within the contract, where it's pulling out that that happens to be a credit of 10% of that invoice for some of these SLAs, and even tying this back into the contract record itself. So you can see exactly where this fit in within the contract that we're looking at. The same thing with earnbacks. If there is an opportunity for the supplier to basically recover some of that, you know, what are the particular credentials that are about that? But based on the information that we have, this is where Syrian can start to assist with that financial impact, meaning based on what has transpired on this particular contract, you know, what should be the credit amount or the earn back potential on that particular agreement for the time period that we're looking at. And again, this can be, you know, overall, or it can also be based off of, you know, the incident levels that we're seeing over the course of time. And, you know, any of these views I can personalize and show specific information.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you very much for this high-level demo. And I'm sure we will have some questions on this too. But we already have some general question about Syrian Labs and the solution. And one is mainly for Mark and Philippe. It's about hard savings. So I understand this is a really crucial question because we usually think about contract management not really into the hard saving space. But when we enter post-signatures features as the one that Syrian Labs provides, then we really do talk about hard savings. Mark, if you want to add something.
Philippe, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go?
Maybe I could talk very briefly on the IT side. Contracts have resource credits, right? So depending on number of computers you need to manage, number of servers, etc., the pricing will vary. Well, for us, as we needed to shut down almost everything during the pandemic, obviously we went to various levels of those resource credits, and it's gone very fluently because systematically, you know, the supplier just says how many computers they've managed for a given period. They charge according to the pricing table that's in the contract, and we just correlate the information with our, you know, our inventory of equipment and just validate. So it's been very easy for us to ensure that we have the right pricing level in a varying environment, and so that's just one example.
And I think to dovetail on what I've said earlier, again, there's the look back audit or the continuous audit. There's that 3 to 8%. It's actually higher than that. It's about 3 to 10% of outsourcing contracts that when we do the review, we're able to find that savings based on the mistakes, credits not applied, missed SLAs, resources not aligning to the right title, duplication of resources where the service provider just doesn't do it right. It is weird how it's always in the service provider favor. I would probably challenge my team to find any example where it was completely the other way. The other thing that we do is in the buildup of the team, right? So if you agree that 60% of the operating model, the work breakdown structure, can be automated, if you've got 10 people, 6 of them can go do something else within the firm, or it gives Philippe's people the ability to, as I said earlier, drive insights and actions. So, you know, there's an automation benefit. Obviously, there's hard dollar savings benefit. I don't want to call it a gain share because you don't like that. It's just not how we want to position ourselves. But there is always savings coming out of these outsourcing relationships based on our experience. The other is the design of the vendor group. A lot of times companies will get into outsourcing. They'll have to design an organization That's where they have the 10 people maybe doing vendor management. With the tool, maybe they can get rid of 6 of them and have them do something else. There's also ways to kind of evaluate what a vendor management team should cost. And there's some metrics out there that I have in the marketplace for that. Operational governance, that software plus kind of folks in offshore locations, is anywhere from 0.8 to 1.5%. When I've done this for a couple of customers and I've benchmarked this with about 20 different deals, that's usually the metric. 0.8 to 1.5% of your ACV for your complex contracts is going to be governance, operational governance related, the tool and offshore resources.
Thank you both. We do have another question around deployment strategy. So what was your deployment strategy in Aéroports de Montréal, Philippe, and what are you usually experiencing, Mark, with Syrian Labs clients?
Well, change management, always a challenge, right? So, you know, culturally, we were into very manual contract management. So we decided to tackle it with one high impact contract and basically make sure that it was well supervised. As that one has been a success story, now people want to basically take benefit and want those that software to be used for their own contracts. So small steps, limited. You know, we didn't take advantage of the full capability of the system as well. We went with things that we knew were essential, and as we know this works, as we see the benefits, now people are growing hungry for more, and that's really how we want to manage change. So it's the next steps for us is going to be to deploy more contracts into the system.
And just like Philippe said, some companies will start small. They'll find and show the value. Some will go all in. I don't know if it's 50-50. It feels maybe about 50-50. As important or more importantly than how they go, it's what support do they have. And so I was jotting down notes as you were talking. One of them is executive support, critical for a contract management, contract lifecycle management, pre-sig, post-sig, auto extraction to be successful. The ability for an organization to transform, communication and change management. So if they short resourcing commitment, a tough technology landscape. And so a lot of these are how a client deploys initially, again, to find either big bang success or quick win success. That's what I've seen. So I've seen it probably 50-50 both ways, depending on where the client is around that dimension or that wheel. It would probably drive whether they try to go all in and do it all at once and get the benefits right away, or whether they kind of push it off and do a crawl, walk, run.
Thank you both. I think we have time to handle a last question. This one comes from Jason, and basically he wants to have more details about how the permission and roles rule are defined in the solution. Who can see what? How does that work?
Yeah, just generally role-based access, single sign-on. The role-based access is probably the most critical that I've found in probably 5 or 10 years doing this. We have customers that have both IT and BPO. You know, the CFO might run, and not that he can't see it, but the CFO's people, the finance people shouldn't necessarily see what's in IT from a contracting and a relationship and a spend perspective. And conversely, maybe the same thing. Really depends, maybe goes back to the top with that executive support to see what they'd want to do. But role-based access is one of the critical features of Syrian, or for a deployment like this, that would be across the enterprise, and then a tiered level of access, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Maybe just 1 minute for a last question, which is really about when you should get started with a contract management solution. And that's maybe more for Philippe, your experience in Aéroports de Montréal.
You know, partnership with suppliers is very, it's key to a successful business. So I would say the best time is now. And the more complex the contract, the more useful the tool is going to be. So yeah, that's my advice.
I would say, you know, special thanks to Philippe and Fluxing for the deployment, the work that you've done, both pre-sales and now post-sales. It does, I know it's going well, or Philippe would not be standing up on stage with us, but you know, you make our job a little bit easier. I was talking to the team earlier and we were harping on customer success and customer satisfaction. So Fluxing, thank you. Philippe, thank you, because it's a great relationship so far.
Thank you all, and thank you all again for your time, especially Mark, Philippe, and Nusha, and all for attending this session. And just a reminder, it will be recorded so you can view it and share it afterwards. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.